Thank you, Sean. Hello, everyone. My name is Chance. I graduated the 401 JavaScript track back in October of 2019. I have been a tutor and a TA ever since. I come from a non-traditional background. I have no formal training in computers or computer science, no degree. I spent over 15 years in construction and 10 years in production management and just-in-time supply chain for construction materials. I believe that kind of lended itself very well to my coding experience. I pretty much walk around now and view the physical world as imagining the code behind it that would build it. And I imagine code very much in the way that I built houses and structures before. What would be the foundation, the 2x4s, the drywall, the paint. They're kind of a one-to-one relation in my brain that's permanent, and I'm happy it's there. In general, I'm kind of an overall eclectic goofball. I like music. My favorite book every year is The Farmer's Almanac. I like learning about theoretical physics, paradoxes, all that stuff. I'm just kind of an endless information seeker. Now, enough about me. The general reason you're here today is to learn about web scraping with Node, right? And more specifically with Puppeteer, because Node is just our environment. Intro's already to me. Basically, Node's just going to be the program we're going to use to show you the code and how this works. Puppeteer is going to be the library that we're going to use to make all this magic happen today. First, we're going to address like why learn web scraping in the first place. Data is pretty big money. That's a giant blanket statement. A lot of people might initially consider this as, your personal information, your credit card, your social security number. Yes, it's very important to protect, but that's not necessarily what's money to a lot of the big companies anymore. It's very much, what sites do you visit? What products do you buy? What ads do you watch? How long do you spend on specific sites? Do you gravitate towards certain color patterns, to certain topics? How can we get you to stay here longer? This is constantly tracked and traded, and it's the largest commodity in computers at the moment. Who would have thought? So what is web scraping? In very broad terms, it's just a simple process of gathering information from a website that you're viewing. It doesn't have to be a direct website. It doesn't have to be Amazon or Google. It can be a URL, but specifically it's analyzing all the things that you see on the page as a user and figuring out how to use them, hopefully productively, in your programming experience. We're going to get into it pretty fast. This is pretty slide light demo. And I'm not going to say that it's code heavy. We're just going to stay in that environment a lot more. There's very few things we're going to need today. We're going to need Node.JS, which if you're not familiar with it, shout out to me afterwards. I'm happy to get you introduced. Node Package Manager, which is just kind of like your install wizard on Windows. That's going to let us be able to use the Puppeteer library. And excitement. If anybody's done code before, we all clearly know that the only way it works is if you're actually excited before you start it. Otherwise, it just fails and you get errors all day. That's it for slides for intros. So if you're all ready, we're going to go just directly to some demos. We're going to go here to code first. And hopefully everybody can see that. I lost my chat, of course. Sorry. There it is. All right. There we go. All right. This is where we're going to write our code, is in this area here. And this is where we're going to be looking for output, down in this area. One of the first things you're going to need, if you're going to use any kind of NPM library, is you're going to need to install it on your machine, and you're going to need to require it in your code. This is really the only point that we're going to hit NPM, but it was a very necessary part of this. Install Puppeteer. All right. And believe it or not, the hardest thing about Puppeteer is remembering how to spell it over and over again. This is pretty much normal Node environment stuff. I am not a great speller, don't worry. Puppeteer. Okay, this is it. We did an install, we required it into our code. We're going to work on first what's considered boilerplate. And what I mean by that is basic setup that I went and got from the Puppeteer documentation They have really good documentation on the internet of how to use their product. They didn't make it because they wanted to make it too hard for anybody to use. So we're going to start this out with what's called an async function. And all that really means to somebody who's not used to it yet is something that's going to take 1,000,000 years on the internet to return to us. Okay. And this last little part here is just to make sure it actually runs. Let's give ourselves some space here. And just to see that we have proof of life, let's go ahead and say, happy Saturday. All right. And I'm going to run this using a NodeMon process because then I don't have to restart it. Demo. Am I in the right file? Oh, today's demo. That would help. Not today demo. Okay, what do we have here? Oh, I should save it. Happy Saturday. All right, so far we're a success. The code gods are shining on us. All right, we don't need this anymore. But what we do need is some of the basics to get Puppeteer started. And one of the first things we need is this thing called a browser. And this will make more sense as we go along, but this is exactly what Puppeteer is telling you to do. And we're going to reference Puppeteer, and I hate that autocorrect thing it does. And it's got a method called .launch. It can take multiple parameters in those parentheses. We're not going to address them today. This is just basic out of the box. We're going to try to scrape something. The next thing Puppeteer wants us to declare is the page itself. And that is simply referencing the browser we've already defined. And it takes a method called new page. Beautiful. I didn't write any of this ninja magic. This is just what they're doing. Essentially, so far, what's going to happen is we've established a browser itself, which by default is Chrome. This is designed to work on Chrome. And we've invoked basically a page model, something to load into the browser. There's a couple more things we're going to need, but one of the very things that gets missed a lot in a lot of functions is when you turn something on, make sure to turn it back off. So I'm going to go ahead and add this line now so we don't forget it. Because if you don't, oh wait, it's not enough. There we go. This thing will just kind of continuously run indefinitely on your machine until you remember to come back and turn it off. All right. I didn't need this for this demo, but I'm going to include this because this is very much in their docs. It's called setup or set user agent. And what this really means is when you're trying to scrape something, there are lots of companies that'll have sort of hidden files on there that are looking for people doing this to their site. They don't want them to do it. A lot of this stuff is referenced by, bots. So this file is called like a robot.txt file. And the idea is that I want to be able to tell this page that I'm going to that I'm not a bot. I'm not some malicious agent. I'm just a general user from a single computer. I'm just somebody trying to go to Google. I'm trying to go to Amazon, something like that. If you don't know how to find your user agent, real easy. We're going to go do it together. Not here. We're going to go here. What is my user agent? Hey, thanks, Google. I don't even have to think about it. This is basically just a series of the different possible browsers I might be coming from. You can copy this and throw it right inside of a string here. That's it. No, I don't understand all of this. That's the general concept. It's letting us in. Excuse me. Okay. There's only a couple more things we actually need till we go live. We're going to need this function called await page.goto. And this can take a couple things. This is going to take, most importantly, the URL or the website we want to go scrape. We have to provide that in a string for the address. And it's going to take another property. For now, I'm just going to leave this generic. But this other property I want to talk about because it's pretty fundamental to the process. It's called wait until. And I'm going to use one that's called network idle 2, and I'll explain that in a second. But what this really means is that, cool, we got all this stuff up and running. I want to go scrape it and I want to go super fast. And then I get an error because it's telling me this thing doesn't exist, even though I can see it as a user. You've probably had this error a lot when you get into async writing. But what it really means is before you do anything else below here, you're going to wait until a set time to make sure that it's there before we go and try and find it. That's a huge overall scope of what it does. Network idle 2, if I remember correctly, waits till it's like a half a second after the last close response between the connection. That's a bunch of jargon. It's okay. Just means it waits long enough till it's there. Well, we actually have everything we need to do to go scrape at the moment, except for we haven't provided our URL yet. And I'm going to declare it here. It'll need to be in string form. Today, thank you very much, Code Fellows. They have volunteered to be my sacrificial lamb today. They volunteer a lot of their stuff. We're going to go to Code Fellows and we're going to scrape it. So far, this is great. We could turn this on and actually it's running. It is scraping, but we haven't told it to scrape anything yet. So let's go check out the Code Fellows website. I don't need my user agent anymore. Thank you. Oh, look, codefellows.org is right here. Beautiful site. It's our homepage of our school. It's got some statistics about our highlights and ratings. It's got some testimonials, ways to figure out how to fund it, companies that have hired us as students before, some top names in the industry, live remote instruction, and the footer that most people don't generally pay attention to, although we're going to get to that here shortly. If Sean's still around, if she has something maybe she'd like to pick out, we're going to do a proof of life. Can we actually scrape something? And I want her to just pick out something random, and we'll see if we can hit it, if we can get a response.
How about that mint green banner across the top under the menu?
This one?
Yeah.
All right. So before I actually show you how we're going to do this, if you noticed, me and John were able to speak normal terms to each other. Hey, it's that mint green banner. That's some kind of description. It's close to the top of the page. We're able to communicate that we're looking for text. That's not how computers speak in general. They have their own language, and that's why you're here learning it in the first place. So we'll see that here when we open up our inspector tool. What is all this stuff? If you're familiar with it, this looks a lot like HTML, and in reality it is, but this is nothing like, hey, that mint green banner at the top of the page. So I just wanted to point that out, that that's not how we're going to ask for information. But I do see when I hover over this, I'm starting to get the banner highlighting, so I know I'm getting close. If I go underneath, I'm off of it. So somewhere in this area is what we're looking for. Open that up, see, that looks pretty good. There's some text. There's a learn more. I'm looking for this text. Oh boy, there's a bunch of stuff in here. What is all this stuff? I can see Jeff there. That's part of it. Where's the rest of it? Oh, there's some text in here. This looks like it's a bunch of nested tags. I'm going to point out that if you're familiar with HTML, the I tag and the strong are actually like, they change the font. They're not necessarily an identifier tag that I'm going to be able to grab onto. So now, how do we get that? We're going to use the DOM model. So if, in 201, when you're like the document.getElement by ID, or in 301, when you're learning jQuery, or the new 301, you're learning React, you're going to be using something like CSS selectors, right? So we're going to use document, and the method I'm going to use for this is called query selector. All right, and that's okay. I'm not done yet, don't worry. We're going to start. I see a div with a class of emergency banner. Classes are great, so are IDs. I am going to point out that that is not how you select a class. It's with a dot. Emergency banner. Did I get this right this time? Cool. Query selector is not a function. Yes, it is. I'm not too worried about that. We're going to go further down. We're going to go into that p tag that it's child. And I think that's all I really want out of here. Oh, there it is. That's why you were telling me it's not a function. Told you I wasn't a good speller. But I'm still excited. So the code will still work, I promise. And what we're going to look for here is something called text content. And this is going to be something you come back to a lot when you're trying to search for stuff. Look at that. We got that whole block. That looks pretty good. Nothing about this line said the mint green banner at the top of the page, but this is how you're going to select things here. All right, so to actually do this in code, I'm going to go ahead and copy this line over because we already did the work of writing it, but I'm going to show you how to implement it in your browser. Anywhere below this line here of your page.go to, at this point, we're at Codefellows. Whatever I write underneath here is going to be addressed on that website. So the first thing I'm probably going to do is I'm going to assign this to a variable. Let's say mint green banner. And this is mostly going to be so that we can log it afterwards. And this is going to take an await function. This is a method called page.evaluate. You're going to be using this a lot. I could take a callback. I'm going to write it in line. All right. So if we put that, whoop, not copy. Oh, I lost my line. That's okay. We'll just rewrite it real quick. I'm going to need to return document.querySelector. Okay, and what did that do? That was a method, and we gave it a class of emergency banner, and its child was the p tag, and we wanted the .text content. Cool. All right. There's nothing that tells us this is doing anything yet, but we're going to check it out here. Mint green banner. Cool. What do we have down? Go away. Go away. Here, let's do this. All right. Looks like we got some there. I'd really like my banner to go away, but that's okay. We'll get there. Right here, you're getting that console log from Mint Green Banner. This is live scraping in real time of the Codefellows website. We've already won today, so you know. What would you do with this though? We've got hello world, essentially. We've got a proof of life. Why even scrape a website with no general direction or plan to do so? I'm not going to put the pressure on you today to come up with a user story, but I have one. My goal today is that we're going to first, I want to gather these stats specifically. I think these are really good highlighting stats that shows the success rate of Codefellows and what they put into their students and how successful their students are post-graduation. And that's going to be my goal for time. If we have a little extra, we might do some other fancy ninja stuff, but that's okay. Small goals. So let's go inspect this first one. All right. I can see 93% here. That's great. It's, however, completely separate from its other tag here, and it's not tied to this. What do we notice here? First, we have a class of single stat. Cool. Go into mobile, and it's got H4s. All right. But then this class hovers the whole thing. All right, let's see if we can grab just one here while we're here. Document query selector. No misspellings this time. I'm going to start at the class of single stat because that's where I noticed this originates at. Don't forget our dot to call our class. Cool. What's its next child? Looks like it has a class of mobile. That looks good. Let's try that. And its next direct child is in, I'm going to try that. I'm going to skip the, I don't think I can skip the div. I think I need to keep the div and then hit that H4, which hopefully has our 93% in there. I'm going to back up one step before I go there. You can see that we've already hit the H4, so we're definitely hitting the thing we want to. I just want the text content out of it. Sweet, 93%. That is one item. We already know we can do that in our code. I could write a whole bunch of lines, 4 lines for each one, 4 lines for these. That would be very inefficient. So what if I just wanted all of them? Well, there is a method for that. Query selector all. What do we get here? We get undefined. Why do we get undefined? I can see all 4 of them. I can get 1. Why am I not able to get all of them? I'm going to grab this and we're going to bring it over to our code, and hopefully I don't screw up and leave it off my clipboard again. Nope. Cool. This presents a problem. Document object model, the DOM we're trying to steal from something from, scrape something from. In a list like this, it comes to you in a weird object content of nodes, a whole bunch of crazy jargon that you can singularly go through. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do this, so I'm going to save you the time today. And I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do it. Because much like everything else in JavaScript, I'm going to call it, sorry, I'm defining this. I'm going to call this stats as we go, because that's what we're gathering. It will be an await function that is, again, a page.evaluate. And if you're doing a single evaluate, you might want to add some things into the same one to save yourself some calculation time. But I'm going to try and keep things generally split up today, so they're a little bit easier to read. Now, how do we handle this loop? This is a big shout out in the first method that I'm going to demonstrate here on somebody on Stack Overflow that is very much documented in the README of where I found this at. It's a method called array.from, which, don't worry if you're not familiar with it. I was not prior to this either. Now, array.from takes in a couple parameters. Essentially, an array-like object is what we're passing it here with document query selector. And then it can take a callback of how to handle that thing. We're going to write it in line here so that we don't get too crazy, but really what this is doing is taking each one and kind of putting it into an array for us. It's creating our indexes as this goes. So let's see if that actually worked now by just adding that little extra to it. Hopefully we have access to the whole stats page now. Okay. This takes a little bit of time. It's okay. We're thankful for all its efforts. Oh boy, what did we get? Undefined is not iterable. What did I miss here? Undefined is not iterable. No worries. What did we get? Right up from. Of course, single stat. Yes. That looks good. Mobile div h4, comma. Oh, I apologize. .dex content. We can't iterate over that. That's not an iterable thing. We're trying to specify a single item here. This part is the thing that pulls out text content for us. So let's see if that actually works. Let's save that. It should fire back up. Ooh, look at those beautiful numbers. That looks a lot like our 4 stats in a nice array. Sweet. Okay. This was a big deal. Like when I got this to actually work for proof of life, I did a couple laps around the house and some woohoos. So be excited when you're doing this on your own. I'm trying to make this look like it was simple and easy. Oh man, laps, do the happy dance when this stuff happens. For those JavaScript ninjas who see that there's obviously some things that can be cleaned up about efficiency and syntax, don't worry, that's not the point of today. The one issue we're facing right now is on line 24, we have a return. That's it. That's the end of our function. I don't want to only do one thing in here in my evaluate. I want two things. I wanted not just those numbers. I wanted the labels that went with them. So at least it made sense of what 93% even meant, or 3.5 million what dollars in my bank account? No, probably not, but one day. So I'm going to change this from a return to something we can store. This will be, we'll call this stat values. So that's what they really were. Okay, this thing will hang out in memory for us. Let's get that other thing. Let's get stat labels. All right. And you can absolutely do array.from. But when I felt pretty tied to that method, and it didn't feel correct to me as a JavaScript person that that's the only way to do something. So I'm going to show a second way. And the second way is something that's called a spread operator. And if you've never seen this before, it's okay. You'll get some exposure to it. You're not going to use it every day. It has its purpose when it needs it, and it pretty much does the same thing. It gives us an iterable object, basically, and turns it into an array for us. So we're going to do the same thing here. The only difference, and we'll go check it in a second, is what we actually want to hit here. We know the numbers were right here. Okay, looks like it's inside this H5, and it's actually, the text content is inside of an anchor tag. All right, there's nothing that can stop us now. This is going to go H5, I believe, and then anchor. And in this instance, we're not actually going to use a callback. We're going to do something else that you may be more familiar with, a method of map, .map, which takes in a callback. And in this case, we're talking about labels. So semantically, let's go ahead and call it a label. And for each one of these labels we're looking at, we're going to return the label.textContent. This is where this comes back into play. And we have no real way to track this, and it might not be super efficient to just get two separate arrays back. I don't think it would be at all. Something that might be nice for us is to have, what do we want? We want an array here. Sure, why not? Yeah, let's try this. How did I want to return these before? Okay. Let's do a return, and we're going to do object, and we're going to say that stats was equal to the stat values. And we're going to give it another property of labels, and we'll give that a value of stat labels. All right, now that we have a return here, let's see what actually happens. JavaScript calls me a liar. It's done so before, but that looks pretty good to me. We have a single object, two separate arrays of stats and labels. They are one-to-one relation to where they are at, respectively. Let's see, we're at 12:45, which seems like we still have some time. There's other things you can do here. This is pretty basic. We went to a single page. We had a goal that we just achieved. We grabbed some stats. The reason I want to grab these stats is part of a story we're going to get to, but we're going to have to stop the code demo because I'd love to code for hours, but that has to come into this at one point. You can come find me after if you want to hang out. The goal that I wanted to do here is, let's say as somebody is searching to get into picking the right boot camp, you might want to place cumulatively of all the different boot camps out there. there's more than Code Fellows. Maybe you don't live in Seattle. It's great that we work remotely now, but there was a time when people came from across the nation to Seattle just to come to the school. I had fellow students like that. It's pretty prestigious, but you know, it's a lot of money. Maybe you heard about other ones on YouTube. I don't know why, but if you wanted to put these all together, you certainly could, you know, make yourself your own API. You could be a server and that would serve up these nice, beautiful objects to people who are searching for them, that maybe they wanted to build websites with. One of the ways you could do that is if you actually built your own server. And oh no, it's okay. We didn't write a path for home. You normally wouldn't if you were just writing an API because you don't host a website. And it's okay. I'm not scared. The gods are on our side today. Come on, come on. You're trying hard. I got a lot of windows running, I know. Oh, that is super tidy. For any of those of you who are familiar with trying to get APIs together, get responses back, put them into nice data, I'll post code for this later. It wasn't important to get to it today. But you can see that we had our stats and our labels that we already worked on and we accomplished together. Some other things I wanted to add to this would be like upcoming courses and their titles. And that stuff's all here, which is great. Sorry you didn't get to participate in building that, but you can. The other thing we could do is, instead of going to my API, what if you wanted to build your own front end too? So this doesn't look like anything we scraped off the web. This is really just one big red button. And on the count of 3, we're going to push it together. 1, 2, 3. Ah, just kidding. We broke the internet. No, I'm joking. It's still taking a little bit of time. It's still doing live web scraping in the background. That was a live scrape of CodeFellow's site from another terminal. And this stuff looks pretty good now. This might look like a sell point. I might consider being like, wow, you know, if I really decided to commit to this industry, there's a 93% chance I'm going to get placed in the field. And here's a list of some of the upcoming courses, the ranges that they start, whether they're a self-paced course, a day course. Hey, ethical hacking. That's nothing like what we did today. And, you know, you might want to add other schools to this list. I don't know why you would. I consider my job done. I would turn this in as a final project and say A+. Thanks for passing. But that's kind of the general end of our demo today. I'm going to leave it a little bit more time for questions because there's always things I wanted to cover that I'm sure that I forgot, and that's a good place for you all to fill in. We had excitement. Everything worked for us. So pretty much after questions, I want to say thank you to CodeFellows. These are the tools we use. These are my links on GitHub. The code's posted there. There's the original super ugly version that took, you know, that's nasty functions all over the place. There's a super cleaned up version for you to understand the sort of process of refactoring it as you go. And please put questions in the chat. I'll try to monitor that as best as I can and participate. Thank you for coming.
So we have some Q&A right now that have been building up. Going back to your code, is wait until always going to be in camel case, and is it in the Puppeteer doc?
Await in camel case.
It's the wait until on line 13.
Yeah, that's specific from their docs. You might, I don't know. And there's no reason for me to test if I can break it at the moment, because why do that at the end of a successful project? But go ahead and mess with that with yourself. This is very specific from the docs. The only thing that I really did that's from chance and my own ninja skills is the actual JavaScript itself. The library is very basic. They want you to use it. It's more kind of like when you want to do cooler stuff with it, then you're going to have to bring your own flavor to it.
Love this question from Darcy. Could Puppeteer be implemented for user accessibility software, or is it already?
Great question, Darcy. I would like to bring up the point that web scraping with Puppeteer is sort of an ancillary like byproduct to have fun with as a hobby dev. The whole reason it exists in the first place is for end-to-end testing of your own products on a Chrome environment. So we're grabbing like small specific values because I had a goal that I wanted to show you, just some fun stuff to do. What you might actually do on a production value, if you had some money and some hardware behind you, is you just grab the whole page and you're out. You analyze it on your own time outside of Puppeteer in a much faster way. The idea is that it's to check all your HTML, whether it's semantic, whether you have accessibility, whether you have alts for your images, whether screen readers can do it. It's trying to analyze and give you a score. A lot of companies want you to come and scrape their website because that's what Google is built on. Google just scrapes every single website for whatever you searched for as fast as you possibly can. It's not malicious, that's what it does. But that's more what it was developed for in the first place, is to know what your Google score would be before you ever put your site out on the internet. So hopefully that addresses that.
So we have a lot of Python people in the audience. I can tell by the questions. Is Puppeteer available in a Python library of some kind?
To my knowledge, you have two separate resources. You have something called Beautiful Soup, and Selenium, I believe, is the other one that I'm aware of. They both kind of do the same thing. Something I didn't quite cover is why we're using Puppeteer and Node versus some of the other possible ways to scrape. For instance, one of the things I want to show you is that when we were inspecting this stuff over here, this all looks like HTML to those of us who are familiar with it. But I promise you, when we hit this website, that the HTML tag was a single div that said root, specifically because I can tell we're using React. But a lot of the front-end frameworks, they don't build HTML and send it to the website. They send a ton of JavaScript to the website, and the website builds it for you. This is kind of like the genius of Puppeteer, and what I'm guessing Selenium does as well, is it goes ahead and takes that beat, that extra second, to make sure that everything has time to process that JavaScript and produce it into HTML so that you can actually scrape it. If you try to look at HTML when it comes to you, just flat out ping a website like this, it is thousands of lines of crazy unreadable JavaScript, and it will look nothing like a div tag with some text content inside of it. So that's kind of a reason why we're actually using Puppeteer in the first place.
Awesome. Can you save the data that has been scraped into a file?
Absolutely. And in fact, in the GitHub repo, there's a file that when you run it, it writes a JSON file for you to your system. Just like that, it does it automatically. But you could certainly save to a database if you'd like to.
Definitely a very Python question.
Dang it.
Here's a good question. You kind of touched on this already, but I was wondering if you wanted to go into any more detail on what the difference is between Node.js and Puppeteer.
Node.js is, it's a way for us as JavaScript people to be able to write server code. Basically, it's not fundamental to JavaScript. JavaScript was originally just a front-end language built to, make things cool on your page, animations, drop downs to drop down when you want them to, that kind of thing. Node, I think, came out in 2012, which I should know because I just watched the original thesis video from Ryan Dahl on it, the inventor of Node. It's really just an extension, for lack of a better term, to get installed on your machine that lets you write JavaScript to interact with the internet directly. You can write Express servers. You'll very much learn about Express throughout your time here at Codefellows. I think Axios is another one that's pretty similar to Express, but making calls to the internet and getting something back. That's kind of what Node is there for us.
We had one more from way earlier in the talk. Ben actually wanted to know, what extension you use to get that arrow in your terminal, I believe.
Let's see.
Ben, feel
Like
free to
this?
correct me if I have the wrong. He said, what extension gets the arrow? So I'm assuming it's the one at the terminal. The arrow function.
That's not an extension. That's the ECMAScript version 6 of JavaScript. It's called the lexical arrow. It's super handy, super powerful. It replaces the big giant function keyword, pass parameters here, do the thing next. It's a ninja, I guess. Ninja JavaScript.
All right. Looks like our Q&A is all cleared. Anybody else? We have enough time for one more question if anyone has one.
Oh, sorry. If it's just about the font, I have done some custom, like I've spent the hours going through palettes and setting some of my own custom fonts on my VS Code. I think one of the extensions I use is, I think Jovial is one of my background extensions. Prettier, bracket, rainbow brackets, all that stuff. You'll get into it. I highly recommend stylizing your thing to the point where you like it, because that'll make you want to spend more time there, especially the terminal. When you first open the terminal as a new student, like straight out of the box, it is disgusting. Doesn't matter if you're on Windows or Mac. Who wants to look at that tiny, tiny, ugly white text? Spend some time, make it look nice.
All right, that looks like all we have. Thank you so much, Chance, for coming and talking to us about web scraping. Very enlightening from somebody who came from Python and looked at web scraping not too long ago.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the time.
Just one last thing I'd like to close if we're done with questions. I'd like to pass on as somebody who loves like efficient algorithms. One of the most efficient ones in nature versus input and benefit of output is the human smile. So hopefully with 55 people here, 55 people just got us a little bit more efficient in their day. So thank you very much for your time and coming. It was a pleasure.